evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order this session of the Tacoma Park City Council. Will the clerk call the roll?
Mayor Stewart,
Here.
Councilmember Tovar,
Here.
Councilmember Dvala,
Present.
Councilmember Costick,
Here.
Councilmember Siemens,
Present.
Councilmember Smith,
Here.
Councilmember Searcy,
Here.
All right, we have just one order change on our agenda this evening. For the work sessions, we are going to do the procurement of the vegetation maintenance contract first and then do the urban forest program update. Looking at our agenda moving forward, just a reminder, in observance of Juneteenth, the city offices are closed on Sunday and Monday. On Wednesday, June 22nd, when we're back here again at 7:30, our voting session will be resolution approving submission of MML legislative action request, single reading ordinance approving a contract for vegetation management. Our work sessions next week include presentation of organizational needs and risk assessment study, presentation of compensation study, a request for council support of National Capital Strategic Economic Development Fund grants, and appointments to boards and committees. Then on Wednesday, June 29th, the council will not meet. Then after the 4th of July holiday, we will meet on Wednesday, July 6th. We will have a proclamation of the 25th anniversary of Tacoma Park unification that actually takes place on July 1st. Our voting session on the 6th will be a resolution supporting the National Capital Strategic Economic Development Fund grant application and resolutions providing for appointments and reappointments to boards and committees. Tentatively, our work session that night will be discussion of possible election code amendments. Then on Wednesday, July 13th, our work session will be presentation of library bids and an FY23 budget amendment number 1. And we have not scheduled anything else for Wednesday, July 20th, the 27th, and we are tentatively meeting on August 3rd if we need to before the summer recess. All right, this evening we have 2 proclamations. I will read. The first is World Refugee Day for 2022. Whereas World Refugee Day is an annual commemoration adopted by the United Nations in 2000 to honor and raise awareness of refugees. And whereas the city of Tacoma Park is a welcoming city that celebrates the growing diversity of its residents and acknowledges that refugees, immigrants, and all newcomers enhance the culture and the economy. And whereas more than 100 million displaced people have been forced from their homes worldwide more than any time in recorded history, including 31 million refugees and 4.4 million people seeking asylum. And whereas refugees are people who have fled their country because they have a well-founded fear of persecution because of their race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. And whereas seeking asylum is a protected right under domestic and international law. And whereas settlement provides safe haven when refugees cannot return home and rebuild their lives in the country they fled due to a lack of access to safety, shelter, healthcare, education, or protection. And whereas the city of Tacoma Park is home to a diverse population of refugees and immigrants, adding to the economic strength and cultural richness of our community. And whereas residents of Tacoma Park aspire to live up to our highest societal values of acceptance and equity and treat newcomers with decency and respect, creating a vibrant community for all of us to live in. Now, therefore, I, Kate Stewart, Mayor of the City of Tacoma Park, Maryland, and on behalf of the council, residents, and staff, proclaim June 2022 as World Refugee Day. I want to acknowledge and thank Councilman Costick for her assistance in putting the proclamation together. And given the work that the Presbyterian Church has been doing in our community to help migrants who have been bused here from Texas, I just want to acknowledge the work of the Presbyterian Church, members of the church, and the community who have been doing that work the last couple of months. Our next proclamation is for Juneteenth, 2022. Whereas the first enslaved Africans were brought as captives to what is now the Commonwealth of Virginia in 1619. And whereas Black people were bought and sold as slave labor for 250 years and suffered unspeakable acts of violence. And whereas President Abraham Lincoln first issued the Emancipation Proclamation effective January 1, 1863, freeing the enslaved people in the South. However, Southern slave owners ignored that order. On June 19, 1865, Union soldiers arrived in Galveston, Texas, and enforced the president's orders, freeing the enslaved 2.5 years after it was first decreed. This day has since come to be known as Juneteenth. And whereas other systems of oppression, such as sharecropping, Jim Crow, redlining, and mass incarceration, and the police violence against Black bodies continued throughout our country's history and perpetrated the racist legal and social systems that persist to this day. And whereas the City Council recognizes the history of racism in our country and how it has led to many current day disparities in education and job attainment, housing and healthcare, as well as disproportionate incarceration rates for Black people. And whereas in 2021, President Biden signed legislation that made Juneteenth a federal holiday, and the City Council adopted Ordinance 2021-41, recognizing Juneteenth as an annual day of remembrance and a paid city holiday. Now therefore be it resolved, I, Kate Stewart, Mayor of the City of Tacoma Park, Maryland, on behalf of the City Council, staff, and residents, do hereby recognize Sunday, June 19th as Juneteenth to acknowledge the historical significance of the day and recommit the city to working towards the dismantling of institutionalized racism. I think those are all the items we have for the record this evening. We will now move to public comments. First, we will take public comments in the auditorium, and then I know we have a number of public comments online this evening. So anyone who has public comments, we have no voting items tonight, so just general public comments, please come to the podium.
Am I on? Oh, pardon me. I'm here to ask that you, Mayor Stewart, and council members make it a priority to terminate the 99-year lease held by the Neighborhood Development Corporation for the publicly owned land at Tacoma Junction, if at all possible before your August recess, and certainly before November's election. As residents, we are not privy, of course, to what's going on behind closed doors as you consult with attorneys. But we do know that time is getting short. None of you, as individuals or as an elected body, could want your legacy to include yoking this public resource to this developer into the future. It's been 7 long years since NDC was selected to develop the property at the junction, based on a proposal which the developer almost immediately flipped for a much larger project. Throughout this agonizingly long process, the developer never indicated any interest in soliciting public input or building a partnership with local businesses. Early on, NDC organized so-called charrettes, ostensibly to solicit public input. In reality, these were carefully controlled exercises where public input was limited to topics like the choice of brick or stucco for the facade of the building. This was a precursor of things to come. NDC's plan not only ignored priorities established in the development agreement, such as adequate parking for local businesses and space for public gatherings, for example, but by moving deliveries to the food co-op to a lay-by at the intersection of 2 heavily traveled state roads. The plan created an unsafe and untenable traffic situation. Meanwhile, the junction has continued to evolve to attract new businesses, which have been able to take advantage of the co-op's policy to provide free parking to local businesses, as well as making the lot available for public events, ranging from the recent Earth Day celebration to the opening of SoCo, the new butchery. In 7 years, you, our elected officials, and city staff have spent countless hours and dollars on this project, until finally on June 16th, 2021, 1 year ago tomorrow, you voted unanimously to reject the NDC plan. And in January of this year, so did the Montgomery County Planning Commission. Resolving this situation may be difficult and even financially painful, but please, please do your job on this one. And I just want to close by saying how much I appreciate the dedication and commitment that it takes for each of you to represent us and to do work on behalf of the city. We really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments this evening?
Mayor, I'm sorry, is it possible to see if we could lower the the podium a tiny bit? I'm having a hard time seeing the speakers
Yeah.
or the
Well, I think
Or
the
the
next
monitor?
speaker is not.
All right, well, I don't think I'll have a hard time seeing you. Yes, thank you.
Raise the microphone.
Not that I'm calling anyone tall or short, but
Well, good evening. My name is Michael McGurr, a resident of Ward 3. I'd like to not only thank the mayor and council for this evening's World Refugee Day proclamation, but also for your efforts over the years to ensure that Tacoma Park is a welcoming community for refugees, asylum seekers, and new immigrants. Mayor Stewart, I know one of your first acts as mayor back in 2015 was a resolution to welcome Syrian refugees. And I was here in this auditorium when an overflow crowd of Tacoma Park residents pushed back against President Trump's anti-immigrant policies and supported our status as a sanctuary city. I've had the opportunity to volunteer at our southern border, assist an Afghan family resettling in this area, and now lead advocacy efforts for the Peace Corps Community for Refugees. But I can still only imagine the challenges that refugees face when forced to leave their homes, their belongings, and in many cases, their relatives behind, and then have to start their lives anew, find housing, certainly a challenge these days, enroll their children in schools, get jobs, and so on, often without the ability to speak English. The resettlement agencies responsible for helping refugees make this difficult transition were decimated during the Trump administration and are now unable to meet the needs of those arriving from Afghanistan, Ukraine, and elsewhere. So increasingly, this responsibility to sponsor these new arrivals is being offloaded to churches, civic organizations, neighborhood groups, and private individuals. After fleeing horrendous conditions, too many refugees and asylum seekers are met in our country with fear and hostility, fueled by misinformation. I'm proud to live in a community that recognizes the many benefits these people bring, the cultural diversity, the entrepreneurship, and a spirit that represents the best values of our country. In addition to wars, famines, gang violence, and other factors driving people from their homes, we're only beginning to see the impact that climate change will have on displacing millions around the globe, including people here in the US. So while I applaud you, our elected officials, on recognizing the positive role that refugees and other new immigrants play in our community, I would also ask, what else can we do to meet this growing need? In addition to considering something like an ad hoc task force to explore how we may better receive new arrivals, another first step may be to work with an organization called Welcoming America. They conduct audits to determine how well counties and cities are doing to welcome immigrants, pointing out what's wrong, as well as any shortcomings. Out of compassion and our own self-interest, let's make Tacoma Park an exemplary model of how to welcome and support those in desperate need. Thank you, and I'd like to say a special thanks to my council member, Casey Kostick, for her efforts to support refugees in her work both on and off the council.
thank you. Thank you very much for coming this evening. Any other public comments?
Good evening. My name is Steve Bowden. I'm a resident of Ward 3. I'm also a former Army civilian. In that capacity, I was deployed to Afghanistan from part of 2011 to part of 2013. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. And thank you as well for your recognition of World Refugee Day. In that spirit, as well as the Tacoma Park's broader spirit of inclusivity, I'm here to request any assistance the city may have to offer for two families who are good friends of mine. Both of these families are Afghans who worked to support U.S. forces in Afghanistan for over a decade. One has been in the area, living in a neighboring county for about 4 or 5 years. The other has arrived in the last month or so. In the case of both of those families, they sacrificed tremendously in support of U.S. war efforts in Afghanistan and really left their entire lives behind to come here and relocate to the United States. In the case of one of these families, the husband and father went on over 1,000 missions in support of U.S. forces in Afghanistan. And in the case of the other family, while fleeing Afghanistan after the fall of the government last summer, all of the family, every member of the family, including the children, were stopped at a Taliban checkpoint on the way out of the country and questioned about where they were going. I don't think I have to tell you what would happen if the Taliban found out that they were fleeing to the United States. So in that spirit, I ask you to do anything you can possibly as a city council to support them. these families, they live in a nearby county, but they very much want to relocate to Montgomery County so that their children can, their combined 8 children can receive the best education possible. I've been in contact with Councilwoman Kostiak about this issue. She's provided me with some resources that have been very useful to me, and I'll continue researching and considering and try to take advantage of for the sake of helping my friends out. But I'd ask any assistance that you can provide as a city. I am sure my friends would definitely appreciate it. And I'll close with a text message. One of my friends sent my wife, who's been very generous in helping these families out. She said that because of your generosity, meaning my wife's, we are more comfortable after arriving recently in the United States. We really needed these resources. As you're aware, we had to leave everything behind in our country, but now we are feeling safe and have more hopes for our future, especially for our kids. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. Any other public comments this evening? All right. Seeing no other public comments in the auditorium, we will now move to the online. And I think first up, we have Sue Miller, correct?
Thank you. Good evening, Sue Miller, Ward 3. I know that some of you were not even on the City Council many years ago now when the Junction Development Project was set into motion. But nevertheless, and unfortunately, it does fall on you, on this council, to finish the unfinished business and end the agreement and ground lease before the elections in November. I know you don't want to step down and leave us, your community, with the weight of this project still pressing down on us. I'm sure you want to leave all of our Junction businesses, new and old and upcoming, feeling secure that they will not lose the parking on the city lot that is so essential to them. And I know you don't want to leave our co-op feeling threatened and vulnerable. I know you want them to feel appreciated for all that they do, for the union jobs and for their hundreds of local vendors, and for the support they give to local nonprofits who feed the community. I understand that there are complex issues to work out in order to end the ground lease. But wherever you are headed after November, you cannot in good conscience leave a new council and a relatively new staff to untangle this situation. You have a short window of time left to begin to lead the community in healing. We all want the next city council to be able to move forward, to envision an inclusive and creative and beneficial use for our public land, a use adapted to the new pandemic landscape that none of us predicted. So please take whatever action is necessary to ensure that we end the ground lease before the next election. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Robert Dreyer.
Hi, I'm Bob Dreyer. I'm in Ward 3. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I just want to echo the comments made before me by Susan and by Sue, and not take a lot of your time. I do think that there are many pressing issues in Takoma Park, and there are issues in Takoma Park that seem like they are sort of at the cutting edge of the new future of Takoma Park. Ending this failed project is crucial, even though it may seem like a really distasteful and difficult task, but it's really crucial to allow a major community in Takoma Park, the Junction community, to move forward with confidence that they can plan for a future that does not involve some sort of resurrected huge development on the project, something that would threaten the co-op, something that would threaten the vitality and safety of our communities. And really, it needs to be done. NDC has proven itself to be a very bad partner for the city, unfortunately. And you know, when you are talking with NDC, and I expect you probably will, you know, bear in mind that it's very rare for a major developer, an experienced developer, to fail a development project as NDC did. This is not something where you folks should feel bad or the city should feel bad about how this has played out. This is something where the developer has really been extraordinarily insensitive to a community that had very important and values that it wanted to see expressed in its city-owned lot. And the developer really didn't make a good effort to try to address those values and didn't make a real effort to try to develop a project that could actually fit the footprint of this site and that could fit into the fabric of the traffic and the community needs around it. This has been kind of an extraordinary failure by a major developer. So when you are negotiating an end to this, I testified or commented a couple of weeks ago before you that you had ample legal grounds to end this project. You have legal grounds, as far as I can tell, to require the developer to pay the performance bond to you, which is probably in the millions of dollars. You can compromise those things to bring this project to an end, but do not feel that that the city has in some way is on the back foot on this. This has really been an extraordinary failure by a major commercial developer to respond to the city's very legitimate purposes and goals in a way that would permit a project that would serve the community to go forward. It's just astonishing that they would, for example, have alleged that this was a taking of their property when they require waivers of zoning ordinances. The project is illegal as developed, as proposed. So I just urge you to hang tough, get this done, and we thank you for the effort. This has got to be unpleasant, but we really appreciate it.
Thank you. Next, we have Esther Siegel.
We're not seeing Ms. Siegel
Okay.
on Zoom.
Then next we have Janet Pegues, if I'm pronouncing the last name correctly.
Pegues.
Pegues, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Pegues.
Hi, I'm Janet Pegues, and I am a resident of Ward 2, longtime resident, more than 20 years. I was going to speak on NDC, but since we've had several people speak on that already, I will just ditto everything that everybody said. But I did want to comment, and I thought I saw Cindy earlier, but maybe she's not here now. But I'd like to direct this to Daryl, if I could, Daryl Brathwaite. I'm concerned at this point about the funding for the recreation center that's on New Hampshire Avenue. I'm not sure what's happening there, but I know that this has been a sort of a refuge for many of us during the pandemic, towards the end of the pandemic when it opened. However, the workout room is not open, is not working now. And I know a lot of course, we all pay a lot of taxes. And I wonder why it seems to be sort of, if you will, neglected. And I happen to be in a boot camp class that uses the gym every week, twice a week. There are a core group of us who are all Tacoma Park residents who use it. And we actually had a discussion the other evening wondering why that particular facility on New Hampshire Avenue just seems to be neglected. We'd like to be able to use the workout room. I've talked to Vincent, I'm forgetting his last name, Vincent, several times over the last year or so about, the workout room there. And they said that, I was told that the air filtration system had to be redone, but I've been hearing that for over a year. And we're just wondering when some money is going to be put into that facility, specifically into updating and redoing the air filtration system, but the facility as a whole. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And I think we can ask for an update that on the where we are with that from the city manager at a later time at a meeting. Thank you, Ms. Pegues, for coming this evening.
Yes.
No, we're not doing that. Next, we have Mr. Paul Hubner.
Hi there. Good evening. Paul Hubner, Ward 3. A few weeks ago, the council had a meeting with the city attorney to discuss Tacoma Junction. We don't know what transpired and what the city's next steps for the junction will be. This council has been working diligently on the junction development for more than 8 years. Fortunately, you've recognized how really bad a partner NDC has become, and thankfully voted unanimously to disapprove the multiple unworkable and unacceptable proposals put forth by this developer. I, for one, very much look forward to this council releasing NDC from the 99-year lease. It was originally signed as a sweetener meant for a developer of integrity who is expected to develop the space to serve the community and meet the well-established criteria this council so clearly set. I ask you get this done before the next council takes office. We don't want a new council member to shoulder the burden of a complicated, unfinished, and unfamiliar capital project, still tied by a 99-year lease to a bad developer. Let's cease relationship with NDC. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Colleen Cordes.
Colleen Cordes, Ward 1. First, many thanks to Mayor Stewart and Councilmember Kovar for your continued efforts to get the FCC to base its limits for exposure to wireless radiation on a thorough review of all the science. Your advocacy benefits local residents and residents across the country. Also, Councilmember Kovar, I'm one of the many residents of Ward 1 who honor you for your years of so thoughtfully and skillfully representing us and all city residents. You have made council service both an art and a science. As so many of your constituents have already testified, we will miss your presence on the council, and the gold standard you've set will be hard for your successor to match. Thank you. Finally, a question for Mayor Stewart. I respectfully ask you, Mayor Stewart, as the leader of this council, will you, before this council session ends in November, take responsibility for leading your colleagues in resolving the impasse at the junction by cutting ties to NDC? The company has amply demonstrated it cannot be relied upon to act as a good partner for our community. Please do not burden the next council with trying to figure out from scratch how to extricate the city from this failed partnership. Can we count on you, Mayor Stewart, to lead this council in a decisive process to regain full control over our public land before the end of your current term? There is refreshing new commercial and communal vitality at the junction. Please act now to sustain that new vitality rather than allow it to continue being at the mercy of the whims of NDC. No one wants to see the morass at the junction drag on as an issue in the fall election. Mayor Stewart, will you demonstrate your accountability to your current constituents by letting us know, at least before the council summer recess, that you and the council have begun taking the necessary steps to cut ties to NDC, and that you are committed to finishing that process before the November city election? Thank you. I look forward to your answer.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Elridge.
Hi, my name is Karen Elridge and I reside in Ward 5, and I'm saying pretty much everything everybody else has said. But I just want to call attention to that this little piece of land has become a vibrant town square / parking lot. And new businesses have created a real need for the parking lot, and events fill the town square with all of our neighbors on an ongoing basis. So let's claim this as such. Let's rip up the impervious parking surface and make it pervious. Let's plant a food forest on the hill that could help address the real stormwater issues of our neighbors downhill. Put up some solar panels, add a few picnic tables, et cetera, et cetera. These are the things that excite me as we go forth to work on climate change and bring our neighbors who have been kind of disjointed through the whole junction issue together to the larger issue, which is climate change. So I would like to see that happen, but first we have to get rid of NDC and move on. Just take our town into becoming sustainable and getting all of our neighbors working together. Thanks.
Great. Next, we have, let's see, Susan was already spoke here. So Julie Body next. Julie, I think you're still muted.
Okay.
Good, we can hear you now.
All right, Julie Bodie, Ward 1. A very warm thank you to the council and staff for the reinstatement of committee recruitment and equity directives on committee representation. The Nuclear Free Committee welcomes them as an organization down to 3 members, all of us old timers and all resorting in Ward 1. Right now, we are looking for 4 more people to pool their insights and energies with ours, including especially young people and people from other wards. Committee membership can offer all new members, besides valuable community service and occasion for wider connections, a stipend of $40 per meeting. For the Nuclear Free Committee, that works out to an hour of meeting once a month. You'd be addressing both big picture and local issues as you serve the city itself. You know, the Nuclear Free Committee originated in the international nuclear free movement and remains closely connected to it, often through city initiatives. I'm going to quote part of a recent resolution by one of these connections, the city's membership in Mayors for Peace. Here goes. Whereas militaries are huge energy users, making a significant contribution to climate change, whereas the effects of COVID-19 pandemic have increased economic hardship across the U.S., compelling many families to depend on expanded federal nutrition programs. And when the COVID-19 public health emergency ends, these families are likely to again face fundamental food insecurity. And whereas the immense nuclear arsenal of the United States, even when combined with the nuclear forces of its European allies, France and the United Kingdom, failed to deter Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. Skipping around a bit more. Whereas Mayors for Peace, founded in 1982 by the mayors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, with 8,174 members in 166 countries and regions, including 220 US members, is working for a world without nuclear weapons, safe and resilient cities, and a culture of peace as essential measures for the realization of a lasting world peace. Be it resolved that the US Council of Mayors calls on the administration and Congress to rein in the annual budgeted military and nuclear weapons spending and to redirect funds to support safe and resilient cities and meet human needs, including providing accessible and affordable health care for all, housing and food security measures to assure reliable funding for municipalities and states throughout the COVID-19 pandemic and future disasters, for which they are the first line of defense. That's my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julia. Very much appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Did Ms. Siegel join us?
Yes, she has.
And then we'll go to Ms. Siegel.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I don't really need to echo what anybody else said. You know what my stand is, and I think it's just about time that we end NDC and do what we hope to do with that wonderful space that we have. And I want to trust in my city council. So thank you.
Okay, those are the last public comments we have this evening. Next, we'll move to council comments. Do I see any council comments? Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say that I had the pleasure, my wife and I had the pleasure of attending a birthday party, a drive-by birthday party for Josephine Warren this weekend. And it was a great celebration of her 99th birthday. And I wish Ms. Warren a belated happy birthday again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Costick.
Thank you. First of all, thank you to all the public commenters who came out. I appreciate the many comments. that you shared and want to thank you. I know there were a number of comments about the junction. Want to thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. Also want to thank the mayor for the proclamations on Juneteenth and World Refugee Day, and specifically call out Mr. McCurr's and Mr. Bowden's speeches tonight. I appreciate all the work that you both are doing, and as the mayor pointed out, the work that the Presbyterian Church is doing as well. I had spoken previously about the idea of the city seeking a welcoming certification, and I hope that's something we can look into in the future. Also want to note that the same organization that does the welcoming certification process also hosts an annual welcoming week in September. So I would love to think about whether the city could host some type of event, maybe through the Arts and Humanities Committee or some other structure to honor that week. It is starting on September 9th, and I'm also attending a webinar in a couple of weeks that will outline a few things that communities might think about doing for that. Want to share some news from the National Capital Region Transportation Planning Board meeting, which we had today. For those who are not familiar with the body, it is the regional transportation planning entity, the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the larger Washington area. And every 4 years, we adopt an update to the long-range plan, which is called Visualize 2045. So we've had some robust discussions, and thank you, Councilmember Kovar, for filling in last month and really representing Tacoma Park well in those discussions. Today, we voted on the long-range plan. It involved an amendment to the plan that was proposed by the County Executive's Office to hold MDOT a little more accountable in their reporting on information on the Beltway expansion project and the 270 expansion project. So I was very happy to see the amendment included. I think it's really important. I also added a clause that was adopted by other members to specifically reference some climate goals, which I'll talk about in a minute, that the group adopted. And so I think those were all really positive things. Ultimately, the long range plan did pass, and I did not vote in support of it because of my and our long-standing opposition to the MDOT Beltway and 270 projects, which are included there. The other big action that we took was on adopting some climate goals and strategies for transportation for the region. And this was the culmination of, and I apologize, I'm going to go a little long. I know my time's running out. This was the culmination of a long effort by the Transportation Planning Board to look at what it would take to reach our goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, ultimately, and our interim goal in 2030. And so there were a number of different strategies that we adopted. 7 that are going into effect immediately, which include things like increasing walk and bike modes of travel, deploying robust electric vehicle charging networks, adding additional housing units near high capacity transit stations and some other things. And then another 7 that we are going to be exploring further, which some of which are quite revolutionary and I think would be really positive. Things like making all public bus transportation in the region fare free, potentially adding a cordon fee for driving into activity centers and some other things that need a little more discussion before we adopt them. The big news was that the original proposal was to set a goal of reaching 30% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. And there was a proposal that actually passed, to my great surprise, to increase that to 50% reduction, which is really, really great. We supported that, obviously, and it went to a weighted vote. We had 19 people voting in support and 17 voting against it, but it did pass. So really, really positive news there. There was then an attempt to add aspirational to the phrasing of that goal that did not pass, thankfully, as well. And ultimately that whole resolution did pass. So some really good news, I think, in terms of how we're moving forward. And I think this is really positive for our future transportation planning in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Searcy.
Good evening, everyone, and I just want to thank, echo Councilmember Costick's appreciation for those that have come out and provided comments tonight, as well as the proclamations that we have. You know, we're very fortunate to live in such a welcoming community. And that's something that in today's time we have to treasure and hold dear. So a couple of quick updates. The next week, Thursday, June the 23rd at 7 p.m. We will have a meeting with the residents at Hopewell, Kentland, and Larch to talk about the sidewalk and traffic calming design plan with Department of Public Works. We will meet at Kentland and Hopewell, and it will be a bit of a walking tour. So I want to encourage people to come out. Also, next week on Saturday, the 25th, is the Summer Mercado. And that's at Ann Street and University Boulevard. And again, this is hosted by the Tacoma Langley Crossroads Development Authority. It's just a wonderful opportunity to meet up with your neighbors, experience some great food, some wonderful artists, and just kind of get out and about. Lastly, I do want to echo the mayor's point about receiving an update regarding the status of the rec center. I know that when we moved forward our ARPA spending plans, one of the items that was included was being able to make some interim necessary fixes in the rec center. So it would be helpful if we're able to get an update on the status of that. So if the city manager can make sure that that happens, that would be great. And that is all I have.
Great, Councilmember Cover.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks to all those who commented. I wanted to just say a word or two first about the two proclamations, the one about Refugee Day and the other about Juneteenth. And I think they're both in line with some of the other steps we've taken to attempt to recognize those in the community who in the past have been subjected to efforts to marginalize or disenfranchise them. So I think it's great that the mayor did issue those proclamations today. And I do want to thank Councilmember Costick for calling to my attention recently a letter that was being circulated asking elected officials if they wanted to sign. I did sign it to President Biden, asking him to increase the refugee numbers for the year. They've really dwindled under President Trump to an abysmally low number. And there's a lot going on, but I do want the president to do what he can to bring that number back up. And so I appreciate that Councilmember Costick brought that to our attention, and I hope that letter will have an impact. And I would say also, I'd love to hear from my colleague going forward if there are other steps we can take to try to assist people here in the community. I know a lot of the work is done by various resettlement organizations, but to the extent that the city can help, we certainly want to try to do that. On another point, more celebratory, I just want to congratulate all the winners and the nominees, frankly, of the Azalea Awards that were announced recently. It was kind of a small gathering, which I found out about subsequently, so I'll be speaking to the organizers about that later. But I was really pleased to see, I don't know all the people or groups, I'm not going to say that I do, but I've had a chance to be involved with Tommy's Pantry, Small Things Matter, of course, read by Roxanne Yamashita, Landry Nicola from Main Street Pearl, Shannon Earl, the Young Explorers, and of course, the first ever winner of the Lifetime Achievement Award, Karen McPherson, our longtime children's librarian. And honestly, other nominees who didn't win, people like Chris Brown and Chris Hitchman, Ken Flemmer and Mark Harper and Louise Jung and all the others, just really great to see that they received that recognition. Being nominated isn't a bad thing. And I think it's Councilmember Costick's time. I also want to thank her for the work on the Transportation Planning Board and voting in a way that's consistent with our work, but also reporting on that important change on the goals. Because when I did have the opportunity to fill in for her last month, it really looked like we were going to end up settling for a much lower target number. So I think it's great news that we went with that. Look, all goals are aspirational, but it's a goal, and we're trying for it. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Great. Next I'll go to Councilmember Smith, who's online with us tonight.
First, I want to thank all the residents who came out and spoke today. Really appreciate your comments. I feel your frustration, but hopefully we will be able to resolve this issue before this council's term is up. This past few days, I was at MML's summer conference. First time attending a conference in person since the pandemic. The immediate past president, the mayor of Salisbury, Jake Day, gave members of the board this wonderful etched clock for our service. I rolled off the board. So it's time for someone else to get an opportunity to serve. I've served as the district VP for a number of years now, but I will continue my service with the local chapter, Montgomery County chapter of MML, as the vice president. I wanted to let residents know next week, June 21st, there is going to be a online Zoom meeting hosted by residents in Ward 5 that anyone can attend. Focus of this meeting will be on the city's budget, and a resident will give a presentation, hopefully a lengthy presentation on the budget. And then finally, there's been questions about what I'm going to do in the fall. Let me just end that speculation now. My name will be on the ballot in November, and I look forward to the contest.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Councilwoman Devala.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the update on the Transportation Planning Board, and congratulations, because from the Climate Committee side, I know how tough that was to get that done. Thank you. I'm just full of thanks today. Thank you to the planning staff, to Alex in particular for coming out for the Long Branch Sligo Neighborhood Association meeting last night. It went really well. The topic was the Washington Adventist Minor Master Plan, and the neighborhoods that are close to the properties that are in the study area but are not in the study area. This is the one group that's really been following it. I appreciate that. I wanted to thank the police for having put out a notice about arresting a particular individual for alleged auto theft. It's been a big issue in Ward 2 and a big concern. And to see progress on that was very heartening. So thank you to the chief. Listening to the two Juneteenth and the refugee proclamation back to back prompted me to follow up on Councilmember Searcy's comments. And it's really is how we treat each other, no matter where the other person is coming from. That is so important to a healthy community. So to everyone who contributes to that, I say thank you also. On the two of the questions that got posed tonight, I have a thought for the gentleman who talked about the Afghan refugees, and I'll come see you in a minute. And I believe we did approve some funds for fiscal 23 for these temporary repairs. I understand the weight room was closed because of COVID, because it's on a different ventilation system. And so it's a health issue. And I look forward to that being open in time for Labor Day and school to be starting. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Just also thank you to everyone who came out this evening to address some of the questions. As people have known, the city council did have a closed session with the city attorney regarding Tacoma Junction to receive legal advice at this time. We are looking into the different options that have been shared with us from the attorney. Just a reminder, we do have a legal agreement, and we are receiving legal advice right now regarding next steps. So that's where we are with the process. I did get, sorry, Councilmember Kovar's invitation to the Tacoma Foundation Azalea Awards was lost in the mail. But I did get the opportunity to attend, and it was a wonderful event to be back in person. And Councilmember Kovar did a great job of highlighting a number of the groups, but in the spirit of highlighting one other, and also that June is Pride Month, I want to call attention to Leandra Nicolay, who also won an Azalea Award. She is one of the owners of and co-founders of Main Street Pearl, and they've launched Pearl Purpose. This is a space in Main Street Pearl that offers an affirming space to Q youth, offering supportive programming and creative opportunities for meaningful community engagement. So she has launched this this past Sunday, and I hope folks can stop by Main Street Pearl, talk to Leandra about her project and the Young People's Project. And this weekend is the rescheduled Village of Tacoma Park Spring Fling at the VFW on Saturday afternoon. So I hope folks can attend that as well. And just an update that Tacoma Park Pride that is sponsored by Old Town Business Association was postponed this week because of rain, and will take place not this Sunday, but the following Sunday on the 26th. And just because this weekend is Father's Day, so I'd like to say happy Father's Day to all of my colleagues here and to our city manager. And I hope all of you are able to get a bit of rest and enjoyment on this Sunday, and to all the fathers in our community and father figures.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next, I will turn it over to the city manager for any comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I join you in that, saying Happy Father's Day to all those that work for this organization, as well as those in the community. I also just want to uplift and recognize and celebrate the significance of people of the Caribbean diaspora, because this June is the Caribbean American Heritage Month, and we do have those of the Caribbean diaspora that work in the organization. So I want to uplift and recognize our staff members and those in the community. And I'd like to just say thank you to every member of our team, every staff member that works for this city. You guys are shining stars, what you do day in, day out for this council, for this community, and we just want to say thank you. We can't say thank you enough. You guys go above and beyond. The mayor touched on it earlier, that the city offices and facilities are closed the 19th and 20th in observance of Juneteenth. And I just wanted to uplift that the police department is still available for emergency calls 24/7. The city is also seeking qualified nonprofit organizations to assist with the implementation of our direct cash assistance program as part of our ARPA spending plan. We do have the RFP online and other places, and it opened on June 3rd and closes on June 30th. And so if you want to take part in being recommended as the nonprofit organization to help us, please look out for that on the city website. The library is continuing to distribute COVID-19 rapid test kits and N95 masks during regular hours. I too want to just recognize the men and women of our police department, and particularly the CID division that made their arrest for the burglary and the stolen autos recently in our community. Also, with the police department, more crime stats are going to be shared with the community and posted later. But I just want to commend the men and women in the police department, because our Part 1 crimes are down by 11.5% as compared this time last year. And the police department will share more of those stats. But as far as recreation, this week marks the last day of school. And our recreation staff are hard at work and excited to welcome our young people to our planned camps this summer. One of the items for our young people, we have 8 summer youth participating in our summer youth employment program this summer. And as it relates to the community center, it was touched on, the recreation center was touched on this evening several times. We do have the budget for it in fiscal year 23. We do have budget for it in fiscal year 24 as our 5-year ARPA spending plan that was approved by this council. And part of that you'll see is not only the exercise room, the ventilation, roofing, the flooring, part of the CIP plan, the elliptical, as well as the treadmill. So over the next 2 fiscal years, a lot of that work will commence. And we also have received funding from the state HCD department to help with a lot of the redevelopment and the capital support. And we just have to balance the intention of the full replacement with the goal of meeting the needs of the community. And staff is hard at work in doing that. More conversations is going to be had. Council just adopted the budget 3-4 weeks ago, so staff just needs time for us to continue to flesh out a lot of our plans and implementing the ARPA projects and initiatives that you all have adopted. And then the last item I would just say, Madam Mayor and Council, is we are very, very, very excited to announce that we signed the agreement and implemented the agreement with Civic Plus. It's been fully executed to migrate to a new website that is more user-friendly. The website design will change the look and feel that we've been accustomed to, but it is going to be better. So kudos, and staff just thanked you for moving that along in this past fiscal year. Thank you.
Great, excellent. And I forgot one thing when the city manager reminded me the last day of school coming up, that for those of you who live around Tacoma Junction, Carolyn and Sandy, our crossing guards, are retiring, and so will not be returning next year. And so if you want to be able to express your appreciation for them, I believe tomorrow morning is supposed to be rainy, but and it is a bit of surprise for them, so don't let it out. That Friday morning, though, I think if you want to join some neighbors in expressing appreciation, folks will be gathering on Friday morning to thank them for their years of service to both our children and our pets. So we thank Carolyn and Sandy for all their work. Great. All right, then we'll move on. No voting items this evening. Our work session, our first one is a procurement item on vegetation maintenance contract. I'll first turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This evening, we have Director Braithwaite online, as well as we have Anna John, the vegetation maintenance manager this evening. I'll first turn it over to Director Braithwaite.
Standard procurement. The city has used contract maintenance for many of our bioretention and street garden areas. And so our previous contract expired. And so we are now went out to bid for a renewed contract. The cover sheet covers the details of the applications we received, the bids we received, and the review process. We also included some information about the mapping and whatnot. Anna Mishi John, our vegetation maintenance supervisor, is there with you this evening and can answer any questions you have. I don't know if all of you have met her yet, but if not, I just wanted to take this opportunity to make sure you're aware. She's our new vegetation maintenance supervisor. She's been doing an excellent job. We're really pleased to have her on board. And I know she'll be very happy to get this contract underway and support the work of the division. With that, I'd turn it over to Anna or the council if they had any questions.
Great. Thank you, Director Braithwaite. Anna, do you have anything to add or?
No, I'm pleased to answer any questions that you have, though.
Terrific. Anyone have any questions this evening? I can't see Councilmember Smith, so just because when we pin. Okay, so we'll. And he does have a question. Look at that, Councilmember Smith.
Ms. Braithwaite, thank you for bringing this to the council. I did put in a request some time ago to get your thoughts on could we find a way for NGOs or businesses to sponsor some of our bioretention facilities? Like, you know, you can see on the state highway, this part of the highway is, you know, I think that would be a great opportunity for people to showcase their business, whether they're a landscaper or somebody that, you know, might have an organization that works with youth. And you know, the city could bring in a couple bucks to defer some of the costs of maintaining these facilities. So I just want to make sure that, you know, we do have a new director in housing and community development. And I hope this idea that a resident gave me, we can look into it and see if it's applicable to our facilities in the city. Thank you.
Sure. We have had a program like that in the past. You may recall Lucy Nair ran a program like that. I think it's no longer active. With programs like that, it's really hard to keep them energized and motivated, and people stick with their commitments. But we can certainly look into that. There are some restrictions with advertisement and stuff, but that program was run out of the Housing and Community Development Office in the past as part of sort of the Keep America Beautiful kind of thing. So I think there's still maybe a couple of people still active in that, but overall, I think the program is no longer in place.
Thank you. Councilwoman Searcy?
Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you.
So one of the things that I noticed is, and in the agenda write-up, it seems that the bid that we're going with was the lowest and responsive to what we asked for. There seemed to be a lot of variation. There's a wide range in terms of those proposals. So in addition to cost, what else did you all consider? Because it just seems like, you know, for the lowest bid, it's like half of the next two. And I sometimes get a little tripped up when I see really, really cheap, and then we fall into some problems with their ability to actually follow through. So what else did you all consider?
So we considered track record of the business. Is it something that they can handle? Because about half the sites are bioretention facilities. They have some slightly different maintenance requirements. And so there are some certifications that businesses or organizations can achieve. And so we looked at that. With this line of business, what a lot of it comes down to is the estimators. So, you know, the week before the RFPs came, the bid was the due date. There are a number of estimators going around the city looking at the sites. And a lot of it, what comes down to is how many hours they think each site needs. And that's not necessarily meaning that the lowest bid is going to do a worse job. It could just mean that they have more experience estimating their crews. Yeah, there was as you can see from the top to the bottom, it's, you know, what is that, 4 times the cost?
Yeah.
And that could, you know, potentially they're dealing with transportation. I don't know. But the ability for them to get the work done at the price that they quoted isn't a concern for us.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councilman Costick?
Thank you very much and welcome, as Councilmember Searcy said. I was just wondering, I noticed that the ordinance doesn't include a specific monetary amount, which I think we normally include. If there's some reason for not doing that, I understand, but it seems like it'd be useful just to add the specific amount that we're entering into the contract for.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Kovar.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, thank you for the presentation and for the information. I just had one question. A few residents had asked me this, and maybe you can just comment. So we obviously have vegetation staff. That's what you and others do. And so can you explain the amount of work and how it is that our staff is hardworking? I've seen you out there doing things. What about all this work makes it so that it's beyond the capacity apparently of the staff that we have, and there's a need to contract out. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I just want to have a better understanding for how that works.
Yeah, Jared, do you want to speak to that? Or do you want me to respond?
Either way, I can give you the normal, our canned response, which is that our staff is basically set up to address most of the garden areas 2 or 3 times a year. With a kind of bioretention facilities and some of the other streetscapes, they need much more frequent maintenance than that would enable us to do. The number that Anna could probably speak better to the total number and the square footage of space that this contract is taken care of. So for this kind of weeding and maintenance, sediment removal, it needs much more frequent. We're hoping for a 6 times a year arrangement with the contractor.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, thank you for noticing that we do hard work. We have a really great team. But we do not have the staff that would be necessary to maintain these sites for the frequency that we're getting with the contract. The sites that we chose, as Daryl mentioned, a number of them are bioretention facilities. Some of them are high-profile streetscapes that are fairly straightforward. So the small percentage of the sites that we decided to put out for a contract are ones that require more frequent maintenance because of visibility, as well as reporting requirements for the stormwater permitting. And they're also sites that we can easily hand off to a contractor so that my staff can then deal with other issues.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Councilman DeBala?
Yeah, thanks. Yes, thank you. And we've met. I've seen you in the parks near my house. Thank you for your hard work. And yes, there's also bioretention facilities near my house, and as I understand it, so that they can function as part of our stormwater system instead of buying pipes, they need to be kept at a certain level of maintenance, and that has to happen on a regular schedule, and there can't be any mess around with that. So I appreciate that they need to be contracted out. But my question had to do with then, and you may have just answered it, why some of the funding, why all of the funding is not coming out of the stormwater budget, why some of it is coming out of the regular vegetation maintenance operating budget. And I think you said it's because a couple of the sites are.
That's right. We
streetscape
include some
sites.
streetscape sites, which don't function as any kind of stormwater filtration, so they wouldn't be eligible to use stormwater funds for.
Sure, but the bulk of the money is the stormwater budget, then I would assume.
I think it comes down to about half or half and half. Is that right, Daryl?
I think 2/3, 1/3. We do have the list of garden sites and bio sites on the as attachments to the agenda item, as well as the map. So that gives you a pretty good
Okay, I see the
ability
map.
to
Thank you.
track where those are and what they entail.
Yeah, correct. And then, so they will be billed separately. And so in the bid response, they included bid prices for the bioretentions as well as a separate streetscape line item.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. I just had one thing was when we do procurement items for the fiscal considerations, I thank you for noting that it is included in the operating budget for this year. But it's helpful to know when we do the cover sheets, if we could actually put in what was budgeted, so we know if we're on target, lower or higher than was budgeted. And this is a longer term question, not necessarily for this item, but we did update our procurement procedures recently, specifically to do more outreach to minority and women-owned businesses. And I don't know if that was done in this case, but I was just thinking as we're getting more procurement items, if there were maybe an update in the future that council could have on how we're looking at fulfilling that guideline in our procurement. So, and I don't know if you have anything to speak to that this evening on this specific one, but that's more of a more general question.
Yeah, I guess, so as a woman in a male dominated industry, I value that as well. And I would say that while I didn't strategically look for businesses that were identified as woman-owned or minority-owned, we did have principal agents in all of the bids that were women. I did I had a really strong effort in getting the RFP disseminated to all the landscape companies in the area, as well as posting it on public websites, trying to get the best and the most bids that we could.
Great, thank you so much. Great. Terrific. I'm not seeing any other questions, so this will come back for a vote next week. Thank you to Daryl and Anna. Thank you for being here in person for your first time before the council. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Next, it's a theme for the evening. We will move on to our urban forest program update.
Hi there.
Hi.
I guess I'll dive right in.
Yes.
Good to meet you all. My name is Marty Fry, the urban forest manager. Some people still think of me as new, and I think I'm just at that point where new isn't quite the word anymore. Came on in October 2020. Have met most of you in person, interacted with a couple through email and some phone calls and meetings. So good to see the council all in person. And yeah, excited to present this report. I know we're maybe a little late. Didn't exactly get a proper full report out last year. We had kind of an interim report on the pilot program for planting, and that sort of sufficed. But this is hopefully a more thorough presentation of what the code calls for. And so if anyone's not aware, the urban forest section of the city code specifies that we present that I, the urban forest manager, present an annual report on the state of the urban forest, and it has these seven items of content that you like to see. And so some of it jumps around. So if anything seems like, oh, why is that there and not 2 steps before? It's all directly from the code. So I figured I'd give it in the same order just so it checks all the boxes and hopefully colored in with some flavor. So we'll dive right in here. See if my clicker works. He said I can go backwards or forwards, but I'm seeing neither. Try it now. Aha. All right. So the urban forest plan composed of the condition of the urban forest along with our tree planting numbers. Report. Yeah, we're good. A report on the permit applications and removals totals. A discussion of city efforts to achieve the canopy goals. Specifically, tree planting is what we're going to cover today in that regard. There's a section where you let me make recommendations, and I've just got one that I'll mention briefly there. About our education and outreach efforts, report on the status of fees, fines, and the tree funds status, and then a brief mention of what our success in planting majority, or in this case, almost all native trees. And then as a bonus, we're just giving it to you all at once. We've also pulled together a draft of our urban forest master plan. So hopefully that all came through as attachments to this agenda item. I'll also post that on the website for the public to review, and I invite comments there. To my knowledge, it's our first time having one of those, so it's my best stab at trying to get it all in there. I'll also mention just broadly, as most of you probably know, my job is 99% in the weeds with permits and with dealing with hazardous trees, dealing with concerned residents, and I rarely get the chance to step back to the kind of 10,000 foot level, which is really fun. but it isn't my day-to-day. So welcome any input on your own perspective from that level. All right, urban forest condition and planting numbers. We can pride ourselves on having probably one of the best tree canopies for a kind of close inner suburban community of our type. I think people move to Tacoma Park for the tree canopy. I get that from new residents all the time, and I think it's great we still have that, and I'm working to make sure it stays that way. Oak decline is still a problem, though we may have some good news there, which I'll mention on the next slide. Most people are aware that a number of our oak species have been experiencing some sudden decline and in some cases mortality. There was some speculation that a beetle, the ambrosia beetle, may have been the point cause of that. Researchers have since become pretty sure that it's a more generalized issue of stress due to a couple of years of really wet weather and then really dry weather that has weakened the trees. And there's kind of a host of fungal and insect-related problems that have kind of taken advantage of the weakness. So it's not really a problem that there's a single fix for. And so I know people are often kind of coming to me like, where's your answer? How do you manage this? You're the urban forest manager. And unfortunately, it's not like some of our previous issues like the emerald ash borer that there were good sort of chemical fixes or other fixes for. But I'll show you in a second some decent news there. Sort of along those lines, we are always monitoring these issues. Two that have kind of been, or one main one that's been in the conversation recently is the spotted lanternfly, a new insect that has been up in Pennsylvania in higher numbers and has worked its way into Maryland. Luckily, it strikes mostly tree of heaven, Ailanthus, which is on our undesirable list, sometimes considered an invasive species. It may be a problem for nurseries and orchards, but from what I've been reading, it's less likely to kind of devastate tree populations other than that. It might stress some trees, but as of yet, we're not seeing it as a red alert kind of a concern. And another one, I just recently got the report from Maryland, I think Department of Agriculture, that the spongy moth, which was previously called the gypsy moth, we got that renamed finally, is very, very low numbers right now. That was devastating oak trees in decades past, but that's one that we continue to monitor and doesn't look like it's coming back as a sort of frontline concern anytime soon. So that's all good news. Renovations and building projects boomed really since lockdown and the pandemic, since 2020. That just highlights the need for good tree protection. Whenever people are putting on additions, putting in new driveways, putting in electric car chargers, these are all situations where roots can be cut as people trench or dig or move heavy equipment, store heavy materials. So just highlights the importance of what I do, I guess. And then, as always, tree planting, preserving existing trees, and maximizing tree and soil health are the keys to increasing canopy growth and urban forest health. So those are kind of the three themes throughout my work that I try to always bring up. The good news, kind of, I don't know where to look here. This is just a brief look at oaks applied for removal over the past 2 fiscal years. These are trees that ended up being dead or hazardous, so the ones that likely were experiencing that decline I was referring to. You can see a pretty substantial decrease over the course of between FY21 and 22. And to highlight just 2 of our most prevalent oak species, chestnut oak and white oak, you can really see a dramatic decrease for a total of 32% down in the loss rate of oaks. So to me, that's good news. I just kind of thought to crunch those numbers today. But I've been seeing that trend kind of anecdotally, and hopefully we see that number continue to go down so that at the point where we see oaks being lost at a similar rate to other species, we know that there's not sort of a targeted issue with this species. Moving on, some of these are just going to be sort of a gloss over of the numbers as called for in the code. Our tree planting that occurred over the past 2 fiscal years in public space, and that was mostly driven by the budget. Planted Tree is our program that previously property owners could order a tree, get the first one half price, the second and further trees at cost. So that's kind of driven by resident interest, not necessarily the city itself deciding to plant trees. And then the pilot program, which you all had us, or we were excited to have the opportunity to embark on that. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. I got a sort of a whole bit on it. And then, of course, for removal permits, applicants are required to replace trees for trees that they remove that aren't hazardous or dead. And then, just in case you're curious, the species breakdown of both on my left, the planted tree program, and on the right, the public space program. A couple of interesting things. Southern magnolia, we had a bunch of issue with deer just ripping them to shreds, and they're very hard to protect. Single trunk trees that have a open trunk, you can put a guard around. These southern magnolias, we couldn't get a guard around, and so in my experience, typically deer don't go for them because they can't get to the trunk, but for some reason we had a crazy year where the bucks were just ripping them to shreds. So we moved away from southern magnolia. So a diversity of native trees in public space, and for the Plant the Tree program, prioritizing canopy trees that kind of get to like 50 feet or larger in height and spread over, when they mature. And then got a couple of maps here just to give you a sense of where our planting activities are occurring. This is maybe the most interesting map because it really is where the city has chosen to target planting efforts. There you see pink dots for fiscal year 22 and green dots for FY21. Really trying to target wards 4 and 6 as was sort of prioritized. We choose a location, we mail a letter to those properties that are adjacent and give them input on one of 3 species options that they can choose, and then also the chance to say, hey, I probably wouldn't like a tree, which isn't always what I like to hear, but we don't want someone to maybe cut it down or rip it out the next day. And so we do want resident or adjacent property buy-in when we plant a tree in public space whenever possible. And then, just in case you're curious where residents have been ordering planted trees from, a little more concentrated maybe in certain wards. As we unveil sort of new planting efforts, we are excited to expand our kind of targeted outreach efforts to really get the word out, as well as bring the financial barrier down so that no one really feels like there's any impediment to planting a tree, as you'll see in a bit. And then through on here, the replacement plantings. I couldn't break out single trees that had multiple trees that were required to be planted. I was having trouble breaking that out, so you saw all the dots. So some of those dots actually refer to multiple trees that need to go in. Moving on to our permit numbers. The permit programs I manage are our tree removal permit, our tree impact assessment requirement, and our tree protection plan permit applications. Removal permits, you can't, another thing I meant to mention earlier is that this presentation is coming a hair early. It's not the end of the fiscal year, so we don't have the finalized numbers. We're pretty close. I was excited or felt it important to get this presentation in because of a planting program that we're hoping to roll out momentarily, and wanted to give you the full presentation before that occurred. I will be providing updated numbers once we close out the fiscal year. But we did see, even with adjusting for the 24 days or whatever it is left, we have seen a decrease in removal permit applications, which is great. Looking back 5+ years, it was a steady increase, and if you followed that curve, I'd be working 60 hours a week or more if they kept increasing. So we like fewer trees needing to be removed. And then the tree impact assessment and protection plan. One brief comment, I was looking at the older numbers, and FY20, so that was kind of, July 2019 to July 2020, had 95 tree impact assessments, and then numbers jumped up to 152 for FY21, and we expect a similar number by the end of FY22, which just shows you how that boom in projects has occurred since the pandemic has happened. A fascinating sort of impact that I wouldn't have predicted, that, you know, global pandemic happens and everyone wants to build. I would never have guessed that. And then this map is probably the least useful because it's just a flurry of flies, bumblebees buzzing around the map. But those are all the permitted private property removals, just so you can kind of see where trees are being removed. I don't like looking at this map, but since I was mapping everything else, I figured I'd show that as well. City removals and pruning. Just briefly to mention how many trees and where we've done removals and pruning. The jump here isn't necessarily caused by an uptick in trees dying. I think it's probably more me getting comfortable in the position and getting out there to inspect more trees after my first year. And the beginning of FY21, there wasn't even a full-time arborist in the shoes. And I didn't have good location data on trees before for FY21, so this is just FY22 that you're seeing on the map. And then, according to the code, just letting you know the appeals that have occurred to the Tree Commission based on our permit applications. There was one appeal in FY21 of both the tree protection plan and tree removal permit at the 434 Ethan Allen Ave site, where there's, I think, 3 houses being built as one project. And the condition upheld my decision to approve both of those permits on the contingency that they secured their stormwater management permit and also posted bond equal to the replanting requirement for the replacement requirement for the tree removal permit. So those permits were issued and moved forward. And then in FY22, we had an appeal of a denial of a tree removal permit over at 7205 Flower Ave. I won't go into the details. It was a tree that I felt deserved a denial based on its exceptional nature and health. And the applicant appealed that. The commission upheld my decision to deny the permit. City efforts to achieve canopy goals. Just a reminder of our current canopy goal is to have no net loss and maintain our 58% cover. That is based on the 2018 data, so it's a little old. We are currently under contract with UVM, the University of Vermont's Spatial Analysis Laboratory, to provide us an updated study based on the 2020 data. So there's always sort of a delay in how these numbers and the analyses come out. And we'll also be providing an update when that comes through, and we'll find a good way to present that report to you all and to the public. Most aspects of my job work towards this goal, so this section could be very long. I've decided this year just to focus on tree planting efforts, specifically on our private property efforts, because there's not a huge change in our public space efforts. So without further ado, I'll just give a kind of a recap on how that pilot planting program went. In the end, we kind of narrowed the design. It was a little broad when we first conceived of it. The idea was to provide free trees to low canopy property types in the city, experiment with direct outreach, and the property types we kind of narrowed in on were apartments, condominiums, commercial and institutional properties, basically these larger properties that don't always have people with the agency or the motivation to go plant trees themselves, or it's a big property. How are they going to really do the planting at the scale that's we need in the city? And so we felt it was a good property type to target. They also, in the case of apartments, it's renters, people of maybe lower income than our homeowners in the community. And they also, just by looking at the data, did happen to be properties that were lower in canopy. And so it was a great way to narrow the scope, get more trees planted per property, and reach some low canopy areas of the city. And then we experimented with providing on-site consultations. That's been a big sort of hang-up, I think, with the Planted Tree program, is that only people who are already comfortable with tree planting would participate. It was all them generating their own motivation. And so how do we, tell people that, the first step isn't telling us you want a tree. The first step is saying, hey, come to my property, we'll talk about it. And so that was sort of an exciting thing to experiment with. I had previous experience doing those kind of consultations with a previous job, and it was fun to be able, for me to be able to do that and meet some people on their properties. The results, we conducted direct outreach through kind of phone and email communication to 31 properties that we selected as in these categories and in those categories. We ended up with 7 site visits, sort of consultations on site. One of them didn't result in a planting plan. So we had 6 planting plans drawn up. Unfortunately, 2 of them in the end, upper management sort of nixed the project. But we did plant 39 trees at 4 properties in the city, which we thought was a successful pilot effort. And yeah, I got some maps in a second. But first, what we learned, direct outreach is great. Personal relationships, great towards getting people comfortable with trees, finding all the best locations that a professional would recommend for canopy establishment on a property. It was a little challenging when we got to the marketing stage. When you're trying to do a targeted program, a lot of our channels of communication and outreach are kind of broadcast for the city, and so it's hard to tell everyone that only a couple people properties can get trees. And so I kind of came to realize that having a sort of a program that's more applicable to the whole city would be a smoother publicity sort of process. Those consultations were great, challenging to administer at the scale we'd like with the staff we have. And so it became pretty clear that we can't really do the amount of tree planting and consulting on private property we'd like to with just in-house staff. And just a brief view of the properties we planted over the Hilltop condominium just down the street on Maple, the Tacoma Langley Crossroads Retail Center, that was an awesome site. This big old parking lot with these beautiful planting strips and boxes in the parking lot that they had been carefully mulching, but no trees. And so the soil was really nice, actually. And so I think that's going to be great shade for a really a really probably hot part of the city. Then the church over in Old Town Tacoma, Seventh-day Adventist, another site that has been losing some trees, and they were really excited to get some new ones. And then the Peak Healthcare Center over on Carroll as well. That brings us to the new private property planting. This is kind of taken on the pilot and what we learned from it, and how can we kind of expand to new horizons. Goals are similar. Eliminate the financial barrier to planting trees. Maximize sort of interest and comfort with tree planting. Plant a large number of high-quality native canopy trees in good locations where they will thrive. Again, that harkens to the consultation piece is key to making sure it gets in the right location and you got the right species. And then building a strong brand, hopefully that people the city can have some pride in and can kind of get the word out, get the buzz out, really everyone kind of buys in together on the idea that, Tacoma Park's all about planting trees, not just in public space, but also on private property. And then making this easily available to all private properties, while especially encouraging and facilitating participation from those lower canopy property types. I do really think we've struck on something with targeting those properties that I just drive around. I see very low canopy cover on these apartment buildings and some of our institutional properties are around town. And so I think the two-tiered effort of broadcast publicity to the whole city and then targeted outreach in addition to these property types is an exciting way to go. And then do this all in a way that doesn't overstretch staff resources. I threw that in, I think, late today. I was like, huh. But we do have an answer for that as well. So that was the goals. Now the design to achieve these goals. And there's the answer right there. We work with a contractor, which we already have done for our tree planting. And the key difference here is the consultation piece, as well as the customer service piece. Up until now, it's been me doing all the work directly with homeowners ordering it, or property owners ordering a tree through the Plant a Tree program. I'm excited to find a contractor that feel comfortable and have the confidence in to do that customer service piece as well, which I'm sure we can do. Someone who has a strong reputation for quality tree planting, customer service, kind of just said that. Plant up to 10 trees per property, although we expect a good bit lower than that for most properties. Most Plant a Tree properties, we're doing kind of 1 to 3 trees. And then up to 150 trees per year, which would be a big jump on what we've done in the past for private property. Provide this service at no cost to the property to, again, eliminate that financial barrier. And then we're going to work with our communications team to build a strong brand and conduct that outreach. And then work with PHCD and other stakeholders, and hopefully you all, to find the best avenues for outreach and get the word out to targeted properties. Timeline for this, we've got an RFP basically put together. We wanted to check in with you all just so you're aware of where we're going first, but hoping to get that issued and a contract if everything works out and you all are into it by the end of the summer. And outreach and promotion could begin later in the summer with the first plantings to occur in mid to late fall. And the key to this is identifying a good contractor that we can hit the ground running with, which I'm pretty confident we can do. And yeah, this could become the pillar of sort of private property planting in Tacoma Park. We've all been, I know this has been said for probably a decade or two that, private property is where a huge portion of the plantable space and existing tree canopy is in most cities, and certainly in Tacoma Park. And I think this needs to be part of the city's planting strategy. So if you have any questions later on that, feel free. Moving right on though, very briefly, I thought through what a recommendation could be, and the only thing that came to mind is one of my pet wishes is to have a geospatial asset and work order management platform for everything trees. Coincidentally, this could also be everything we do in public space. There are platforms that do exactly this, not just for trees, but the tree-specific stuff we would track would be all of my inspections, upcoming and recent tree plantings, not just track the trees themselves, but creating sort of inventory points for available planting locations so that we can better track sort of planting prioritization into the future, which currently is very challenging to do, partly because we don't have the inventory, which I'll get to in a minute as well, but also because we don't have a good way of sort of tracking it, visualizing it, and updating it easily. And then the big piece here is managing tree maintenance work. There's a lot of jobs that our crew can do and do, but they're often small jobs that it's cumbersome to assign this work without sort of a streamlined system. And so I think a system like this would be really helpful. I've asked for it. I'm not sure where it stands exactly, but if I have a little spot to make a recommendation, that's what I say. And aspirationally, this system could be where our tree inventory lives of all trees in public space. It'll take a long time to actually do that inventory, but having the platform to plug the trees into would be a great place to start. Education and outreach activities over the past year, or past 2 years, because again, we're doing FY21 and 22 today. The approved tree species list was published in January 2021. The council, gave the decree that we would focus on native trees and climate adapted trees. We went with just native. It was simpler that way. And yeah, there are plenty of good natives at this point that are appropriate for the urban environment to choose from. So we're working with that for now. When I was previously consulting for the city, I always noted that list you had before was just unworkable. It was very strange, not very clear to tree removal permit applicants, like what can or should I plant to replace this tree and do the requirement. So really excited that we have a clearer guide for that. Instead of category 1, 2, 3, 4, we have small, medium, and large. And I think people understand those words a lot better. And then transparency for what trees the city plants. I think there was also some question of what's the palette we work from. And so this, this list and guide was, serves that purpose as well. Just in the past month, we've finally gotten underway on this webpage overhaul that I've probably been talking about since I came on board here. We finally were able to hire an intern who has some web experience, and Nina's been awesome. Shout out to Nina. I jokingly told her to tune into the meeting, and then I said, you don't have to do that. But wherever she is out there, thanks to Nina. We're basically trying to cover everything. I think we're gonna have like 15 or 20 different kind of micro pages on the different topics of urban forestry city activities, on tree care practices, and everything in between. And then every year we do the Arbor Day event. This year we did a fun tree walk, and I invited a couple of community groups, or I put the word out for as many groups as wanted to come. We had 3 come out and kind of give a little introduction and invite other residents to join for their volunteer or sort of advocacy activities. Briefly on the fees, fines, and tree fund, citation payments you can see there, tree removal permit fees. There's a big number there for FY22. That was a huge part of that was the Hillwood Manor Apartments tree removal permit, which was over 10. I think it was like 50. They did, I think they were the first trial run of the over 10 trees public meeting process, and I believe some council members might have been at that. So that's why you see a big number there. Means we have a lot of money to put towards tree planting. Good time to expand our private tree planting efforts, I think. And then the tree fund currently holds a balance of $200,350. Doing some math on the last 5 years, I calculated an approximate accumulation of $40,000 per year. And in FY23, we're proposing to jump from our previous allocation of $25,000 per year towards street tree planting up to $45,000 for a combination of street or public space and private property planting. And that was sort of an interim increase. I think we could do more than that to start drawing down and actually dispersing this money in the tree fund towards planting, which I think is the best and highest use of that money. So I have some thoughts on how much maybe we could draw down for a set number of years, and that might be a discussion for the next fiscal year budget. Real quick, the native tree percentage, again, it's in the code there, so I'm speaking to it. FY21 was 99% native, FY22 was 96%. This would have been 100% if it weren't for, there's some cherry trees that were planted in just the recent years before my tenure that were, some of them had died and were out of warranty, but to honor the initial sort of public comment and selection of species, we did go ahead and replace those with the Japanese flowering cherry. Going forward, as we get further and further from those initial selections, I think we can justify kind of saying, sorry, we're going to plant a native tree now. So going forward, I expect that number to be basically 100% for all plantings. All right, annual report complete. On to a brief overview of the draft urban forest master plan. Some of this will repeat some of the concepts I've mentioned, and so I'll probably move quickly through some of the content. But first, the guiding principles for this plan, accounting for the unique conditions that trees have to contend with in the urban environment. We don't live in a old growth natural forest. There's a lot of problems that trees contend with that we need to work around. Maximize tree health and tree canopy for the benefit of all. Self-explanatory. Collaborating with the community to plant trees where they're wanted and needed most. So balancing that, how do we select where we know an area could benefit from, all the psychological and reducing heat benefits of trees and tree canopy, and then also finding people that really want them, because we know that, good stewards of trees is also a great way to make sure they live good lives. And so fitting in both sides of that equation is sort of the needle I need to thread. And then understanding the work with of many stakeholders with interest in the city. I'll talk about that a little more in a bit. So the 6 tenets of this, or the 6 actual categories of work of this plan: public space planting, private space planting, public space tree management, private property tree regulation. You can kind of see a parallel theme there for public and private space. And then more broadly, tree care education and outreach. And finally, data collection, evaluation, urban forest monitoring and evaluation. Public space planting, we hope to up from, I think it was 75 or 80 trees more or less we've budgeted for, and I'm hoping that depending on the contractor and the bids we can get up to 100 trees per year in public space. This is street locations, parks, and city properties. And then in the code, you mentioned, it mentions coming up with our prioritization plan for the urban forest. It's hard to kind of map out everywhere we're going to plant for the next 6 years. And so what we've pulled together is the factors we use when prioritizing where we're selecting for public space plantings. And so there's kind of a lengthy section there, which hopefully adds some clarity when people are saying, why hasn't my street gotten planted? Then those factors, we can keep in mind for maybe why we made a certain decision. I don't go into those here, but you can read the draft to see about that. And then always providing avenues for resident and property owner input on tree plantings. And again, creating that buy-in whenever we can. Number 2, private property tree planting. This basically leans on this idea of this new tree planting program that we're excited about. I basically said it all before: provide native canopy trees at no cost, for on-site consultations, no cost, 150 trees a year, publicize the program broadly, and then conduct targeted outreach is the crux of the plan. Public space tree management, split this up into the main categories of management work that we do. And this gets away from just the kind of the feel-good pieces of trees are good and gets towards the, for people to continue to feel good about trees, they don't want them falling on their cars or having branches blocking their buses as they drive by, or various things like that. So responding to mitigate hazardous tree situations is definitely a key part of our plan. Pruning trees for clearance, that's clearance over the street as well as over the sidewalk. And then also sightline clearance. So wherever we have trees blocking stop signs, traffic lights, crosswalks that might be shielded and you can't see someone about to cross the street is no fun. And then a big part of our public space management is maintaining strong working relationships with all of the other agencies and utilities that also work in public space. I go into the list in the plan itself, but key ones would be PEPCO and other utilities to make sure that we're providing the oversight that we can with the kind of regulatory tools and relationships we have to ensure the best possible urban forest health outcomes. That's sort of it's always a dance of how to build those relationships and apply pressure in the right ways to get the best outcomes, while not, in the case of some certain public agencies like MNC PPC, where they have their own in-house tree protection staff, you can step on toes pretty easily. So relationship building and finding positive ways to work with my counterparts has been a goal of mine. And then, of course, overseeing city projects. It'd be terrible if we did all this work on other people's private property and criticizing MNC PPC or whoever it is. I haven't criticized them. I'm just saying that in the hypothetical. If we weren't actually also overseeing city work and making sure that it doesn't result in unnecessary tree loss or health decline. Number 4 here, private property tree regulation. We already know tree removal permits, tree protection, prohibiting hazardous trees from remaining on properties. That's another part of my job, that maintaining public safety through having an avenue to do the code enforcement process to ensure there aren't dangerous trees sitting around on private property. And then similarly, prohibiting vines from smothering trees, which is also in the code, that you can't let vines grow up to the lowest branches of a tree and then eventually suffocate the crown and kill it. Basically creating not just the loss of canopy, but creating a hazard. And so I think that's a very good regulation, and I work with code enforcement to enforce that. All right, moving on to tenant or area of work number 5, tree care, education, and outreach. I've already mentioned these topics before, but the 3 tenets of the word I want to get out are tree planting, improving soil health, and tree protection. If we could solve those 3 things in terms of a public education, I'd be very happy. And then our techniques we use here, maintain a great web page is sort of the first and foremost thing. If we can have sort of the go-to resource that's up to date and really useful for any Tacoma Park resident, if they didn't have to go anywhere else, that'd be great. We're also going to have some links to learn more than what we can provide on our webpage as well. I'm responding to resident inquiries, on an hourly basis. I get so many calls and emails, as you might know, which I love doing. I love responding to those, but that is sort of a piece of our public education. And then if this program comes to fruition for tree planting, really excited to provide that on-site consultation to educate people on their properties about trees. And then the Arbor Day event is great. Excited to do more of those. Other events as time allows. Not a whole lot else happened in the last year, but I'm always open to partnerships or kind of ways to collaborate with other groups that are hosting things. So we'll see what else can fit in the schedule there. And then newsletter and media, other social media content to get the word out. And then finally, our monitoring and evaluation. The biggest piece here is maintaining really good records. I love right now for internal tracking, or for a couple of things we are able to track pretty well in the GovQA platform. It's a little clunky, but I've found a way to kind of jerry-rig it into what I need. And tracking good data. I'm really excited. I mentioned my intern before. One of her projects is going to be inventorying as much of the city as we can for those available planting locations. So we actually know where we can plant. We have like 10 data points we're going to be capturing for each location to sort of work towards those prioritization factors I mentioned earlier. And each year we can kind of look at that data and just look at the map of the city and decide, all right, we're going to do a cluster here, a cluster there, and we'll be able to communicate a little more transparently about what's coming down the pike. And then we do the every 3-year urban tree canopy analysis using remote sensing technology, LiDAR, special radar that can sense densities and decide what's grass and what's tree and what's bare soil. So some of you may be kind of familiar with the past reports there. Later this summer, hopefully we'll be able to present the findings of the updated data and report. And that is it. I also am aware that there's the Friends of Native Trees Tacoma who have presented on their native tree list. And I think there's some maybe question about whether the city should be posting this resource on the webpage. And I did want to just kind of give a comment so that my sort of views on this are on the record. I love what this group is doing. I think it's awesome to be furthering the conversation around native trees and providing residents as many tools as possible for selecting trees in their property. There are some reasons that I think this guide shouldn't be on our website. One of the first ones is just the concern about duplicating the city's own guide, having 2 Tacoma Park tree species lists. There's some potential for residents being a little uncertain of where to go for what the city is kind of presenting as the list. But then there also is sort of a technical question about their use of this kind of ranking system of which trees are better at biodiversity than others. They've used basically these caterpillar numbers drawn from data collected from across the continent and at the genus level, so one level up from species. They've then applied that to each tree species and then ranked which one is better than the other at providing biodiversity value. In my opinion, this kind of ranks trees and pits them against each other in a way that's going to probably tend the user towards using the highly ranked trees and not using the lowly ranked trees. And it just happens that a number of our favorite trees for the urban environment rank very low on their list, including the honey locust, sweet gum, bald cypress, hackberry, black gum, which was just recently named the county tree of Montgomery County, the black gum, and the hophorn beam. And so everything but that one element of the list I'm a fan of, but it just so happens that that is the key kind of ranking system in their list. So I'm in communication with them, and I've offered to have another lunchtime picnic table meeting to kind of make sure they understand my concerns with that component of their list. Everything else I love, and I look forward to working with this group and sharing their good work. But in case there's any question about why we're not jumping to post that on the website, that is the reason. And that's everything I have.
Great. All right. Well, congratulations. Thank you. I'll jump in first, even though I see Councilmember Siemens' light on. I'm going to take the prerogative of mayor tonight and just really say thank you. This is an incredible amount of work, and I can tell you personally, as one of the people on the council that really pushed for the planting, the pilot for planting on private property, to see the work that you've done and have this be advanced is incredible. And the goal of thinking about planting 150 trees on private property every year is really wonderful. So thank you so much for all of this, and it's just terrific. And one suggestion I had is I lost track of all time in the last few years, but the HCD in the newsletter a couple of years did it like an insert on the work that they had done. They highlighted the Habitat for Humanity project and a couple of other things. And I know this is part of your marketing and wanting to get that out there, but I wonder if working with Donna and the newsletter editor, like what you presented tonight in terms of the pilot project and where you want to take it, I think would make an amazing insert for our newsletter to make sure other residents know the great work you're doing and where the city wants to take that project. So you may want to like look at that as a template and see if that's a possibility, because this is great. A couple of nitty-gritty things, I think, on one of the charts where you had the permits eligible, it was early on eligible, like there was a jump for this year in the number. I was just curious what that was. It was like a...
Yeah, and I could have lingered a little more. There is an oddity to comparing some of the statuses. We want to give the total number of permits applied for in the data, but some of those are in process.
Right, that's what it was. It was like 29 for FY21.
I probably should have clarified that in real time.
51. It just seemed like a big jump.
Yeah, and it's just there are some permits from FY21 that are still eligible for permit.
Got it.
Those are just kind of sitting in purgatory, and I do need to go reach out to those people and say like, hey, like do you want we're going to withdraw your record or your application if you don't take action here.
Got it. Okay, that's perfect. And then this next point is as someone whose house was up here under multiple dots, as you know, one of the things as you're moving forward and making improvements, which has been light years, as being just a homeowner and working with our city department in terms of tree removal, tree planting, you all have done amazing work in the last few years of just making the process so much better. One suggestion for taking it to the next level is when someone does have to replace trees and then uses the city tree planting program, that there's some way to link it, if possible, in the future.
Yeah, yep. And we've been recently doing a push for the verification of plantings.
Yes.
And
I know, because I've got
you were in this exact boat.
Yeah.
No, that has been a failing on my part, is not having the process for once trees are planted through Plant a Tree to then automatically update the record.
Right.
So I own that, and we will definitely be fixing that.
Like I said, it is so much better than it used to be. This would be icing on the cake if we could get to that place.
We'll do it.
And the final thing, I didn't know if there was any, I know recently you met with Delegate Charkoudian about some of the legislation that she's been able to be working on tree planting and everything in the Crossroads area. You guys met for lunch last week. I didn't know if there was any opportunities that you see there, or is it too soon to say in terms of possible funding sources or other things?
Yeah, it's super exciting to see so many people want to plant trees and finding ways to fund tree planting. Given that I'm sort of in the midst of rolling out our own tree planting program and deploying our own tree fund, I've sort of been a deer in the headlights of how do we do that while also having someone else pay for our tree planting. And as far as our staff time, should those programs work in parallel, or should they try to do the same thing, or is that kind of butting heads against each other? I still need to figure out how the partnership and the sharing of resources and funding could work. But you can kind of see where it's like two people trying to do the same thing, and promoting one program means the other one's getting less promotion. And obviously, we want to find ways to promote everything together. But my work might be highlighting our own tree fund deployment more, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you. All right, I will now turn it over to Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you so much for this presentation tonight. And I really want to thank the City Manager Fox and you for the incredible work that's been done over the last period of time since you've been here, since you're still new.
Call me new as long as you want. Keeps me young.
And I just have a couple of questions, some to satisfy my curiosity more than anything else. I don't require any lengthy answers in the interest of time tonight, but you, at the tail end of the presentation, we're talking about the ranking system by the community group. And I just wondered if there was any science behind that ranking, or if it's something that had some science behind it, but because they changed it to a different level, it didn't have as much strength.
Yeah. I've reached out to two of the professors that are involved with the type of data that they've used. One of them, where the data directly came from, and yeah, it's good data for what it's applicable to, which is sort of a broader kind of question of generally in broad genuses and across the country, which genuses are doing better. And there's basically, I got the word that in certain cases, like with oaks that rank really high, there is confidence that down at the species level, those species also rank high. But they weren't able to provide me evidence that was true across the list. And so that's where I had this hang up. It's like, are we just using oaks and it's kind of because they all rank high at the species level, we're just assuming that the rest do as well? And so until I see that data, which I haven't, I'm not really comfortable promoting it as a ranking system, again, because of some of our trees that rank really poorly.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for looking into it as you have, and even though you're maybe opposed to what it is, but to understand it better so that it is an informed decision that you're making.
And I'll just say one more piece there is, I'm not sort of a stick in the mud opposed forever. Like, if I'm very open to the conversation, and I want to see some data that would kind of paint the picture in another way. I'm not an entomologist, and there's definitely there's science here that I'm not an expert on, and so I'm very open-minded on this topic.
Thank you. Another thing is, like I say, just my curiosity, and it's a comment you made when you were talking about the pilot planning system, and you said in 2 cases that upper management had nixed the projects. Just wonder if you could elaborate a little on that.
Yeah. One of them was over at Washington Adventist University, where I've been working with the facilities maintenance sort of head or staff over there, and everyone in that shop was on board, and it seemed like they basically suggested that they had the ability to green light everything, and then at the last minute they're like, oh, let's check with admin, and then they said no. So I didn't get any words for why they said no, which was kind of a shame. And then over at Park Ritchie, the apartments, that was a question of the property manager who I was working with was all on board. And then at the end, she's like, all right, let's pass this plan up to, I guess, the management company or the owner. And that was a question of I think, the maintenance piece. Even though I said it's like, if you do 1 year of good watering, then you're in the clear maybe, like, a little bit the second year, you can probably get by. But as soon as maintenance came into the conversation, they said no. And
Well, it's refreshing to hear that it was the client's upper management and not your upper management.
I guess I should have clarified that. Didn't mean to throw Jamal under the bus there.
I thought we had something hot here.
That's funny.
And then lastly, you were talking about the geospatial asset management. And do we not have a tool for that with our stormwater management system? And you may not know that, but I thought we did, we talked about that in the past.
Yeah, so and this specifically is about a tool that is kind of user-friendly for field use, ideally that our crew could be using. And there are tools specifically made for this. It's basically like a GIS system, geographic information system, that's super tooled for a layperson to use and update records and take a photo of the work they did. And then, and you can imagine cities across the country have to manage things in public space, be it a stop sign or be it a roadway that's got potholes. And there's some great tools
Street lights,
available.
there's a whole bunch of things.
Yeah. Sorry.
I say street lights is another example, but
Yeah.
I thought that we did have a tool for that for the stormwater management. Maybe we've only just talked about it.
Yeah, not to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Great. I just to add to Councilmember Siemens' point on if in the future there is a hiccup with some organizations not buying onto it, there's always the ability to use the council to help maybe make a better case sometimes, particularly with our partners like Washington Adventist University or others. We have a long relationship with them, and when we were doing Flower Avenue, had a great bit of back and forth, as Director Braithwaite can tell you. And so in the future, if you get so far along and there's a hiccup, please feel free to call upon those of us who've worked with some of the upper management folks in the past, and kind of been able to get over some last minute hurdles. So. Because I'd love to revisit Washington Adventist University.
A lot of space there. A lot of space to play.
So, I think I saw Councilmember Smith with his hands up.
I just wanted to say, Mr. Friday, this was an excellent report. You did a fantastic job. I see that, if I recall, the goal was 156 trees that you wanted to plant in a year. Can you say anything about how you came to that goal and what resources would you need to expand that goal? And other than Washington Adventist University, have you spoken to any of the other landlords and their management companies in Ward 5? And what type of response did you get from them?
Yeah. To the second point, I could not speak offhand which locations in Ward 5 we conducted outreach to. I do recall a lot of the properties in Ward 5, other than Washington Adventist, were sort of smaller apartments, in some cases with tree canopy over. I did kind of like a Google Maps survey to determine kind of the first high priority properties to reach out to. But I'm very excited to work towards all apartment complexes to kind of conduct that full outreach effort to, as we offload the tree planting and consultation work to a contractor, that frees me up to do that outreach more. So I think that's kind of a good way to go. Yeah. And then the first part of the question.
How did you get your number of trees that you wanted to plant?
Yeah, so basically I have sort of a rough ballpark of where I'm hoping, we can get with this contract for a price per tree. And then I took the tree fund and I kind of did an estimate of, how much could we draw down every year and sort of have a reasonable sort of like planting push. And between private and public space, I figured that we could kind of escalate to the level I'm thinking, 100 public space, 150 private, for 7 years. And with only dipping into the tree fund, we could support that level if the numbers work out with the pricing that I'm hoping we get. Again, that's a question. And then, so that's just tree fund. The question then is, does the council and does the city want to allocate more money besides just the tree fund? So those are questions above my pay grade, but that's more or less where I started the conversation from.
Okay, that's good. Good to know. And on the GIS application, do you have a price for us that you could share with the council?
Yeah, I think it was we actually had identified a potential option that I feel liked a lot, and I think it was $30,000 per year. And again, I know I'm not part of that conversation. I'm just giving my tree advocacy piece. It was a platform that would work for many things beyond just trees.
Right, but with the $30,000 option, could we use that option with other things, or do we have to add on other aspects to the application so that other departments could use it? Because I'm a huge fan of GIS. It's a very powerful tool, can tell you a lot of great information about a community.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with I have to see each tool. Could this one replace others entirely? That is a question. GIS, ArcGIS and platforms like that are really powerful for sort of in-depth analysis and kind of doing the everything platform, but with high technical ability is kind of how I see it. And something like this would be tailored towards, purpose-built that everyone could use and actually could be part of a workflow for ideally, a number of staff at varying levels of technical proficiency, not just our sort of GIS trained staff, which is very few. And the cost per ArcGIS license is pretty high, as I understand it.
Right. Yeah, I'm a big fan of this, and GIS can just provide help the council, future council, in data-driven decision making. So I hope you continue to advocate for this and bring in other departments, because this is something that we need here in the city. Thank you.
And if I can just jump in, Councilmember Smith and members of council, it's part of what Mr. Fry is discussing is something that was part of our budget development process, and we had a wish list, and we talked about asset management, and Director Braithwaite and acting director David, who's in over HCD right now. They looked in asset management and geospatial and other digital technology platforms that we can use. Was part of the process, part of our wish list as a leadership team. It didn't make the list based off of the budget development, but it's something that we're going to continue to look towards to become more data-driven as an organization.
Thank you, Mr. Fox.
Thank you. Councilman DeBala?
Yes, thank you. This, having been one of the people who wanted to see the reports and the planting, this is great. Thank you very much. And I have a bazillion questions, but I won't ask them all tonight. Overall, I wasn't expecting a draft urban forest management plan as well, and that is just really exciting to see that too. And in that, I had a question about the public space management goals, and I wanted to ask you about that. And there seems to me to be a difference between mitigating hazardous tree situations and actively working on the health of the mature trees we have. And maybe that second one is in here somewhere, but I'm not quite sure if it's a matter of phrasing or if there's some reason why you didn't want to label that as a goal.
Yeah, you're just saying general health of the existing trees?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actively promoting the general health of the existing trees.
Yeah, I guess we didn't really include that.
Yeah, it doesn't jump out, so that
yeah.
was why I wondered.
Yeah, and some version of that crossed my mind is, so I'm glad you brought it up. Not a lot of our activities are, pruning dead wood, managing for risk. There's only so much we really can do for our kind of large existing trees. So I'm happy to kind of brainstorm ways that we could kind of frame or commit to new activities that were sort of actively promoting the health of existing trees.
Yeah, I'm not sure I know what they are either. but-
Yeah, it's hard, at a certain point, there's tens of thousands of trees, and, once they're established, we do kind of let them go until something comes up, while make sure that the soil isn't getting impacted by construction activities and all that.
Right.
So it's a fair question. I can think about how to address, what activities we do conduct along those lines.
Yeah, and along those lines, there were several references throughout this to improving soil health in different ways, and I noticed that, and that's part of it. So I don't know if this is so much already that we didn't have to have till now. So I'm reluctant to suggest, and should you think about another piece, which is how would you work on soil health, because the planting is absolutely the priority. But that was the other sort of big picture thing that jumped out at me. Yeah. I did also have a question about the tree planting, the pilot program. You did outreach to 31 properties, and you ultimately got into the details with 7 of them. So that means there were a number that were not interested for some reason, and I can think of a bunch of reasons why they might not be.
Yeah.
But I'd like to hear what you found.
Yeah, so it was a number of kind of like playing phone tag with property managers, and then kind of getting through to them, and
not
then
just
having
not
a
on their
conversation with them, and
Yeah.
a number of those I did get sort of a good sort of phone time with, 5-10 minutes on the phone, and I don't have the exact sort of survey of why they didn't proceed. I think some of them at the end of it, they were like, "Oh, this sounds great." They hear free something, and they they do light up, but then their statement at the end of the call is, "I'll think about it," and then we don't we don't hear back.
No, follow for next year. Yeah.
Again,
And-
an expanded outreach effort that would involve more touches, I am excited about, to try to reach people that might be on the fence, and with a little more effort could be pushed over.
Yeah, I'm impressed with how much you've been able to get done, given the size of the program, shall we say. And I'm really excited that you've been able to get a good intern. That's very, very helpful. I was also going to ask about the geospatial and the coordination with some of the other mapping efforts the city's got, that we've done that one, and yeah, that's it for me for now, other than to say again, thank you. I'm very pleased.
Great. Councilwoman Searcy.
Great. Well, I just want to echo everyone's appreciation for all of the hard work that you've done. I know in Ward 6, there's been so many new trees that have been planted in the area, and I know that it is in large part due to the tremendous amount of work that you all have been doing in terms of outreach. So I do want to pick up on one point that Mayor Stewart raised about the Crossroads area and the meeting that happened with Delegate Charkoudian that you and I were both a part of. And I think one of the things that became very clear is there's a bunch of different pots of money with varying amounts of money that's available. But if what we're really trying to do, for example, in the Crossroads, we have a number of commercial large parking lots that would require things like asphalt removal and deeper digging, or figuring out some creative way of planting trees. And that requires a lot of money and a lot of will from the property owners. And I wonder if you all have given any thoughts in terms of maybe working towards identifying potential stacks of funds that maybe private commercial property owners may want to consider in order to be able to actually afford to do some tree planting in what is currently asphalt areas or parking lot areas. Because I can imagine, specifically in the Crossroads area where we had so many trees that were removed, replanting along University Boulevard, and there's clearly a desire from a number of the businesses, but it would require a substantial amount of resources because of how with the Purple Line, the way that the property lines are being pushed back, they're basically being pushed back into parking lots, right? So has there been any thought about that, or is it's only been a week, so it's fine to say, yeah, no, we're still getting emails about funding that may be available. But I wonder if that's something that has been thought about in terms of a number of our very large surface lot areas that's along New Hampshire Avenue or along University Boulevard.
Yeah, I think it's a really sort of important point to bring up, because certain areas that we know are low canopy, it's not just that they've got all the soil and no one's choosing to plant trees there, it's that there is no soil, or that the soil they have is compacted and really challenging to grow a tree in. So it's an important point. It's always in the back of my mind, and there's some researchers who have really advocated for these more intensive sort of soil remediation techniques of bringing in a backhoe and ripping out the old compacted soil and bringing in a tailored mix that increases organic matter and aeration and makes basically the perfect loamy mix. Costs a lot of money to do, but I've always been really excited by those techniques, and I would be very interested if we kind of figure everything, not everything else out, but getting through kind of getting this off the ground. I would love to go there how do we create programs that target those not low-hanging fruits of planting locations, and then obviously the piece where it's private property. It's one thing to kind of bring a backhoe and rip up public space to improve the soil quality. When you're then sort of deploying that on private property, there's all the jurisdictional and ownership and questions. So I think there is a point where it's hard for me to take the lead on it, but I'm very excited to partner in that kind of thing, and I guess continue the conversation and certainly be part of those. That was a great meeting last week, and a lot of people who want to spend money planting trees. So at a certain point, maybe it isn't just a matter of everyone setting a high number of trees and then seeing how to plant that many. Maybe it is about saying, oh, maybe you're going to be the ones who are doing the soil remediation piece, and you've got your pot of money for that, and oh, you can do the high numbers of trees. So I think it is important to recognize that it's not just about number of trees, but about quality of site and about reaching sites that historically maybe couldn't receive a tree because of the soil conditions.
Yeah, and I know Kaylee is super, super eager to try to involve the Crossroads CDA in those conversations, because we've heard from business owners that they would like to have the trees and the shade and a more pleasant walking experience for their patrons. So now may actually be a really good time if there is motivation for us to at least start having those conversations with property owners and really digging deep and understanding these funding opportunities, which from what we were told are very, very, some of them are very difficult and pretty labor intensive to try to get, specifically the larger scale fund. So yeah, no, I think it'll be great for us to continue to include you in those conversations so that we can come up with the model. And that was something that we did here, is that there wasn't a really good example of someone who was able to turn some of these commercial parking lots into tree-lined streets using some of these grant funds. So if we were able to do it, that would be an amazing model for others. So definitely look forward to working with you on that.
Definitely.
Thank you. I'm going to go Councilmember Costick and Kovar, and just because we are reaching the 10 o'clock hour, just going to note that we have one other item on our agenda, because with our new procedures we put in place now, we're supposed to end our meetings at 11 o'clock, and I'm supposed to give a warning or note at 10 o'clock. So just doing that. First, Councilman Costick, then Kovar.
Well, first of all, thank you. This is really amazing. And I feel like I've learned more about trees in the past 45 minutes or so of your presentation than I have in a while. So really appreciate it. One of the thoughts I had with regard to your comment about the upper management being concerned about the maintenance costs, and I think that's something we've heard previously from other property owners, single-family property owners as well. And I wonder whether there might be some opportunity to provide some support funds or some assistance with maintenance into the future. I know that could get tricky, but I wonder if that might be something that could be offered in sort of limited situations.
Yeah, it's definitely crossed the mind, as you can imagine. Like, that's the first thought when that's the response. It's like, well, is there a way to get around this? And I'm open to the conversation. Nothing obvious is stepped forward of, how do you create a program that could offer that to everyone or target it? Like, I just haven't been able to think up the way to navigate that. So very open to the conversation, though.
Great. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions about the new program that you were suggesting. I think overall it sounds like a great idea and it makes a lot of sense. I just wanted to kind of understand if I'm understanding correctly, we're shifting a little bit from a focus on properties that might sort of serve residents who have a greater need or lower income overall, focusing on some of the apartment buildings, for example, to sort of a broader program that I think would apply to sort of a general single-family property audience, if I'm understanding correctly. Just kind of trying to figure out how we make sure that we're targeting people who really need the assistance more than providing it to people who might be able to afford their own consultations and plantings.
Yeah, it's you're correct. The idea is kind of a both and strategy, and I think it's there's lots of private property in this city that trees are dying on, and we want to reach everyone with trees. And a lot of people, it might be that an oak dies and they replace it with a crepe myrtle or a dogwood or a red bud, and so being able to kind of get our foot in the door on as many properties as possible to offer only a medium to large canopy tree, I think is huge to the kind of urban forest canopy goals that we're setting. And then, so that's, one half of the equation, or, whatever the percentage is, how do we get on as many properties with shade trees in places they're going to thrive as possible? And then also exactly, making the program as accessible to people without the financial means as possible, and then going above and beyond with the outreach efforts to try to encourage as much participation from these targeted properties as we can. So yeah, it's trying to acknowledge both sides of the coin there. I'm also most excited about a program that everyone can feel part of, and yeah, I think kind of creating an identity around like me and my neighbor and everyone, we're all planting trees because it's a good thing. I think there's the outreach effort around that. There's something we can all feel part of when we do it that way.
Yeah, thank you. I think that does make a lot of sense and could help generate more excitement about it as well if more people are doing it. The other just sort of brainstorm I had as we were talking was we as a council have talked before about revisiting our pilot payment in lieu of taxes agreement. And I wondered whether maybe there's some element of that we could build into related to trees and working with the city on planting or maintaining or something like that. So we can just maybe think about that in the future. Thank you.
Councilmember Colifar.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for the reminder about 11 o'clock. I think you basically said I have an hour now, right? So I can... Thank you for the presentation, and I do want to say that I've had a chance just recently on two separate tree-related matters in the city that connect to our local schools to have some meetings directly with Mr. Fry and other people from the school system in the county, and it's been very helpful in the liaising on that and helping out with that. So I think the hands-on approach has really been great, and I appreciate it. And for those who don't know, who are watching, maybe your intern is watching, a couple of years ago, we tried to, with our ordinance changes and also with the resolution on the tree canopy and urban forest policies, we tried to move away from a situation where we're just managing the trees through the permit process. And I think this is a huge step in that direction. And I will say, and I really appreciate that most of the items that we called for in the reports, I think we had some language in the ordinance before, but there's more now. Most of that language and most of what we called for the long-range plan is one way or another in what you put forward here today. I understand some of it's still in draft form, but I appreciate that. There are some questions in areas where I might do it differently, so I'm just going to ask a few questions and make a couple of points and then maybe submit additional information separately. But just on the draft plan, for those who are watching or who may look at this afterwards, that will be posted and people can make suggestions to the draft plan. Is that how we're thinking about it?
Yeah. I need to get it up on the urban forestry page.
Okay.
And it should have been included in the attachments for the council agenda today, but I guess we can't expect everyone to dig through there and the public to go find it there. So
right.
My plan is to post it elsewhere, and we don't have like a deadline per se.
Okay.
I plan on giving it, a couple weeks to a month or
Great.
two for people to comment, and
Okay.
we'll make revisions
Good.
as needed.
That's helpful. So one of the things that I mentioned a lot is that we have the racial equity policy and the climate change framework, our housing and economic development strategic plan, our open or public space management plan, the stormwater work we're doing, and all those are sort of interwoven or need to be interwoven with each other. And so I think the pilot thing that Councilmember Costick mentioned is a good example. I would like to see us find a way to weave that in so that maybe if there's a big apartment building and they've asked for some sort of reduction, maybe there's a requirement to plant some trees that would go along with that. But, in terms of racial equity, for example, the language issue is a big thing. And so it seems to me that with this outreach, and I think using tenant associations and, as the mayor said, working with the council, I have a feeling it won't get to where we want to go. And in terms of the really participatory kind of approach that we want, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, but if it's just you calling everybody, that's probably not enough. So we need to find a way to broaden that engagement to hit all of these. So that's just one suggestion I would have for going forward on how we do it. In terms of the number of plantings, so it sounds like you're talking about 100 plantings in public areas per year and 150 through the new program, if I'm getting the numbers right. And so when we look at the separate section where the chart listed the numbers that are coming down, either from permits or just because they die, and it's, the chart's not right in front of me right now, but it seemed like those numbers were bigger. And so if this is my question, if our goal is known at loss, that means at a minimum we stay where we are. We could go higher. It's the floor. It's not the ceiling, right? So how do you see? And I understand it takes years for the trees to grow, but is the 100 plus the 150 enough, or is that it, or do we need to go beyond that to try to be in the known at loss range? It's a long question. Sorry.
It's a really hard question to answer with data, but I mean, the quick answer is that we're not the only tree planter in the city. There's lots of people planting trees in other ways. There's lots of oaks dropping acorns and planting themselves.
Right.
And so I don't, that might have sounded flippant. I didn't mean it that way at all. But there is natural regeneration occurring, and so I would not assume that the only trees that are adding to that replacement of the lost ones are what the city's planting. But it is a fair question, is there a way to target the right number? And I don't really know the answer there. I mentioned before the way I came to the numbers, and it was kind of looking at the tree fund and how can we deploy it over a reasonable number of years.
But I guess if we see the next LiDAR results, and if, for example, that showed a drop below 58%, say, could we then think about, okay, maybe we need those numbers to be higher in order to try to not have a net loss? I mean, would that be one of our key measures of that, the next round of LiDAR data?
Yeah, it's not a question I've really tried to crunch numbers on. I'd be happy to do some research to see if other people have. It's just so hard when the city is one small piece in a lot of ways of the planting effort. And so I'll look around though to see if other cities have kind of come to that determination of like what's the optimal or the necessary amount of tree planting to be conducted.
So one of the things that I think I saw in the report, it said that, or in the master plan, it said the highly populated areas in many cases have fewer trees, and that's some of what you were targeting with the couple of dozen, larger ones that you reached out to. And so that may be an example of where the racial equity policy comes into play in terms of, large, less costly group living situations having fewer trees. And so we do want to try to address that. But I think one of my colleagues also mentioned this. We need to somehow make sure that it isn't only those who know about it who can get it, right? And so how do we avoid programs of this type being just sort of for people in the know, if that makes any sense?
Yep, yeah, the outreach effort is key there to kind of fit the two goals that I mentioned earlier, trees for all, and also making sure it's not trees only for a certain group, that people who might be less likely to be aware of the program or have the resources, that they're given all the opportunities and resources and encouragement to participate.
Okay, just one other question and a couple of quick comments. So you talked a little bit about education and outreach, and that there are some obvious limits on what you can do. You're running around getting permits all the time. So to do more of education and outreach, is that we need more dollars, we need more collaboration with residents and other groups, we need more staff capacity? What do you think it would take without, entering into proposed budget comments that you're probably not supposed to talk about? What would it take to do more than we're currently able to do? To have, say, 4 community forums a year so that people could learn about different kinds of things. I mean, is it just a question of having more money to be able to do that, or working with outside groups? Are you personally having more time to schedule it, or?
Yeah, it's a challenging topic because as you can maybe tell, I enjoy each of these fields of work. I enjoy teaching. There is a certain point though where it's not just about staff time or having another couple interns. Like, there's only so many areas of work that I can manage, and sort of different sub-disciplines or sort of overlapping disciplines. So I hesitate, even though I'm excited about the value of education and outreach, I hesitate to kind of overcommit what I could manage, even if I had, another intern. If you want to create a whole sort of nonprofit within the city that's all about sort of outreach and education, then that's another conversation. But there is a threshold where it's like, we want the work to happen, but how much can Public Works really be the lead in that?
Sure. All right, and then just a couple of quick comments. I mean, I think the geospatial platform sounds great. I know we've got a lot of demands on the budget, but the price seemed lower than I would have anticipated, so that seems like a good idea. On the tree fund donations, and this is one question that's in the language that we had adopted, if people can contribute money directly into the tree fund, that somehow needs to be made explained and have jump out at the website. And I don't know if it's tax deductible or not, but I think there are a lot of people who would put money in there, and you'd be surprised. You might have more money than you think. So if that's the case, we need to make them know it. And then the only other thing is on the tree list, I really do appreciate the reliance, the heavy focus on native trees. That was something, as you know, that I really pushed for, and I'm glad to hear that it's there. I think in the future, a Japanese maple type situation like that, I mean, I just think we have to say, sorry guys, that didn't make it. It's got to be another type in the future. So just for what it's worth, I think I understand that you were trying to, honor the previous choices, but I think what we've got now is a situation where when that happens, let's find something else that's better suited. So that's what I would say. So that's all I got right now. I only used 7 minutes instead of an hour.
I think you definitely used more than 7 minutes because you started talking before 10 o'clock. Marty, thank you so much for the, oh, Councilman Costick, did you have something else? Or no? Oh, no, sorry, that was Councilmember Costick. My glasses, if I take them off, I can't see. Thank you so much for this presentation. I hope you'll see from the council comments that we're just really very appreciative to all the work that you're doing and look forward to follow up with you as well. Is there anything you need from us at this point?
No, I just encourage you to follow up if you have any questions or input on the draft master plan. And anything about this presentation. If there's more that you want to see next year in the annual update, let me know.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
And thanks for the opportunity to present it. This was fun.
Great. Thank you.
Take care.
Sure. Fun. I know. Great. Our last item tonight is the draft resolution regarding legislative action requests. Does the city manager want to say anything, or I'm happy to walk us through that, or if the
Thought you would want to
Okay.
this.
We have a document that was prepared based on our conversation last week, our work session. We did identify 4, and I believe we can only submit 3. Is that correct? Yes. Just checking with the city clerk. So the first one item, if you look at the resolution, was on, I think Councilmember Smith had raised this. It's an item that we've had on before about increasing the municipality's authority to collect revenue in different forms. The next item a number of us discussed last week was having MML take up initiatives regarding housing. The third item was regarding climate change policies, and the fourth had to do with pedestrian and biker safety, SHA responsiveness, and meeting Vision Zero goals. So those are the 4, and next week we are to vote on this. We are to submit 3 LARs, so we need to narrow down this list. And just as a reminder, this is what we put into MML, and then MML decides what it's going to have on its priorities. But just because it doesn't make this list doesn't mean that the council can't decide that it's a priority for us moving forward. So, but this is just what we're going to submit to MML. So before we actually vote on do a hand vote on which 3 of these get put into the resolution for next week, does anybody have any comments on the general content of these 4, and or I guess you could add one if you wanted to. Councilman Devala.
As the person who I think suggested the probably inadequate words on number 4, so the first thing was I was trying to capture with this notion of MML prioritizing pedestrian and biker safety and Vision Zero was to push them in the way that we had pushed them on climate, to eventually embrace that. So I'm not sure that these are the right words, but several of us talked about this issue last time, about the need to put this package of issues in front of MML. And as the person who proposed, I think was proposed number 3 in the first to begin with, there's really not a lot of environmental and climate issues that we're aware of at this point. And so framing them as municipal authority to go beyond state requirements was a way to keep a placeholder for the climate and environmental issues. But I'm not as sure that that's critical. For
So can we
us
take it
to
off the list?
We could take it off the list because, MML is going to get to anything that involves a municipal authority anyway, I think.
Okay. Did you want to propose language for number 4, or?
Oh, I did. You're looking at it.
Oh, okay.
And I'm saying that I think it could use some help.
Okay, well, we did have Ann and Suhani look at these. Is that correct? Am I looking at the right version?
You are.
Okay.
Oh, so if they've already looked
No,
at,
well, no.
No. Okay.
I sent it to them, but they haven't had a chance to weigh in, and I think they might be on the call.
Oh, okay.
Maybe.
Apologies then. I didn't realize they
Um,
would be on with us
that's
tonight.
great if it's
Well,
true.
let's see if they are.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
I hear your voice. I don't see you. There you are. Thank you, sir. Oh, my apologies. I did not realize you all were on the call this evening. Wonderful. So, so perhaps you heard, I don't know if you and Ann have had a chance to look at the language in what was number 4, what we're kind of calling the pedestrian safety one.
Yeah, so I think number 4, which was the kind of Vision Zero pedestrian safety bullet was added a little late. So I was able to take a quick look at the language, but I haven't really delved into it as deeply as the first 3. I know Anne kind of redid a little bit of the housing language, but I personally have not edited or looked into the Vision Zero language.
All right. So maybe that's something, if we keep it in, we can revisit.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you. Councilmember Kovar.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure what 3 is really saying, and we just passed a big,
We're taking it out. It's gone.
oh, we are?
Yes,
Oh, I didn't-
Councilman DeBala just said we
Oh,
could take it off.
okay.
It's gone.
Unless Suhani objects.
What?
Unless Suhani knows something I don't.
Nope,
Yeah,
she's shaking her
she's
no,
shaking her
it's
head,
gone.
good.
Yeah, I think post climate solutions now, the main focus would just be municipal authority anyways. And Cindy, I think you're right. That's something probably MML is going to keep an eye on regardless.
Okay.
Oh, well, I'm good with the 3 then. I mean, we could get more specific on the pedestrian one, but I don't know that we need to.
Right. And I do know, Suhani, you and Ann were able to look at the housing one, and this is reflective of your, right, okay, that's where I got the confusion. The housing one we had cleared with all of you. Okay. All right, well, seeing no other council hands up at this time. And that was easy that we took off the climate, though we have the 3 changes. And Suhani, if you could just take another glance at this, particularly the Vision Zero, so that we get the language correct. This will come back to us next week then. And Suhani, I appreciate you being on the phone call, and my apologies again for not knowing you were with us.
Oh, not a problem. I was listening
Great.
in.
Terrific. All right. Well, then that concludes our meeting tonight. Another reminder that we are observing Juneteenth. City facilities will be closed on Sunday and Monday. Police emergency obviously are always open. And we are back here on Wednesday. And happy Father's Day again to all those who are celebrating. Good evening, everyone. We're done.